The conference room aboard the Celestial Dawn was built for beings much larger than humans. Jake Morrison sat in a chair designed for the Vorath species, his feet barely touching the floor. Next to him, Amy Carter had given up on sitting properly and simply perched on the edge of her seat, datapad in hand. Around the long metal table sat representatives from 6 different species, each one looking more impressive than the last. General Thexelar stood at the head of the table, his scales gleaming under the bright lights. He was Vorath, nearly 3 meters tall with natural armor plating that could stop most small arms fire. His yellow eyes scanned the room as he brought up the tactical display. Jake had served under the general for 8 months now, and he still found the creature intimidating. The mining operation on Arcturus 7 has gone silent, Thexelar announced, his voice deep and rumbling. Long-range scans detect swarm biosignatures. Thousands of them. We deploy in 6 hours. The Krelthar warriors clicked their mandibles in what Jake had learned was anticipation. They were insectoid creatures with 4 arms and exoskeletons that shimmered like oil on water. Lieutenant Crixtel, their squad leader, leaned forward. My warriors are ready, General. We will crush these parasites. The Vorath heavy assault team will lead the initial landing, Thexelar continued. Krelthar units will secure the perimeter. Drayan scouts will map the tunnel systems. He paused, his gaze falling on Jake and Amy. Human personnel will remain aboard ship in support roles. Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he said nothing. Amy's hand moved slightly, a gesture that meant stay calm. They had been through this before. Every mission briefing ended the same way. Commander Velthar, a Drayan with silver fur and 6 limbs, spoke up. General, the humans have requested combat assignments multiple times. Perhaps we could use them for light reconnaissance? No. Thexelar's response was immediate and firm. Humans are Class C species. Coalition regulations are clear. They lack the physical durability for frontline operations. With respect, General, Amy said carefully, we've completed all the combat training requirements. Our scores were... Your scores are irrelevant, Lieutenant Carter. Thexelar's tone wasn't cruel, just matter-of-fact. Your bone density is 30% lower than Krelthar. Your skin tears from impacts that wouldn't bruise a Vorath. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced healing. You are valuable members of this crew, but not as warriors. The room fell silent. Jake could see the other species looking at them with something between pity and agreement. To them, humans were the new kids in the galactic neighborhood. Soft, weak, fragile. Good for technical work and administration, but not for fighting. We understand, General, Jake said quietly. Amy shot him a look, but he shook his head slightly. There was no point arguing. Not here. The briefing continued with tactical details that Jake tried to pay attention to. The swarm was bad news. Everyone knew that. They were a hive mind species that consumed everything biological in their path. They didn't negotiate, didn't retreat, didn't stop until every last one was dead. Planets that fell to the swarm became lifeless rocks. When the briefing ended, Jake and Amy walked back to the human quarters in silence. The corridors of the Celestial Dawn were wide and tall, making Jake feel like a child in an adult's world. They passed a group of Krelthar warriors who towered over them, their heavy footsteps echoing off the metal walls. I'm tired of this, Amy said once they were alone in the break room. We didn't join the coalition to push papers and monitor radio chatter. No. Jake poured himself coffee from the machine they'd requisitioned from Earth. It was one of the few things that made the ship feel like home. But what can we do? The regulations aren't going to change just because we're frustrated. Danny's down on the surface prep team, Amy said, changing the subject. Medical staff. At least he gets to see some action, even if it's just patching people up. Danny Wright was the 3rd member of their original training group. While Jake and Amy had been assigned to the Celestial Dawn's operations division, Danny had qualified as a field medic. He was good at it too, calm under pressure and quick with his hands. The aliens respected him, even if they thought humans were fragile. He shouldn't even be in the landing zone, Jake said. Medical teams are supposed to stay at the rear staging area. Amy smiled slightly. You know Danny, he'll find a way to get closer to the action. Probably claim he needs to establish a forward triage point or something. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Jake and Amy checked supply manifests, coordinated with the logistics AI, and made sure every weapon, ammunition crate, and medical pack was accounted for. It was important work, but it felt hollow. They watched the assault teams gear up through the bay windows. seeing the Vorath slide into their powered armor and the Krelthar test their plasma rifles. "Transport Delta 7, you're clear for launch," Amy said into her headset, watching another dropship detach from the celestial dawn and descend toward the planet below. The blue-green world of Arcturus 7 filled the view screen, looking peaceful from orbit. Jake knew better. Somewhere down there, thousands of swarm drones were probably tearing through the mining colony right now. The first reports came back within an hour. The colony was overrun. The swarm had hit fast and hard, coming up through the mine tunnels. Hundreds of civilians were dead. The survivors had barricaded themselves in the main administration building. But they wouldn't last long. All units, advance to secondary perimeter. Thexler's voice crackled over the command channel. Swarm numbers exceed initial estimates. Requesting orbital fire support on Grid 774. Jake pulled up the tactical map. Grid 774 was right at the edge of the colony. The swarm must have established a nest there. He coordinated with the weapons team, and moments later, the Celestial Dawn's main guns opened fire. Lances of superheated plasma streaked down from orbit, turning night into day on the surface below. "Direct hit confirmed," the weapons officer reported. "Massive thermal bloom. Nothing could survive that. Swarm breach on the eastern flank," someone shouted over the radio. "We're falling back. They're everywhere." The command channel descended into chaos. Multiple units were calling for support, ammunition, medical evacuation. Jake and Amy worked frantically, trying to coordinate everything from the ship. It was like trying to hold water in their hands. "Danny's unit is in Sector 9, Amy said suddenly, her face pale. "That's right in the path of orbital strike authorized on Sector 9. Thexlar's voice cut through the noise. "All units clear the area immediately. Firing in 60 seconds. General, we still have personnel in that sector," Jake shouted into his comm. "Medical Team Delta hasn't pulled back yet." "They have 60 seconds to move," Thexlar replied coldly. "The swarm cannot be allowed to break through. Firing in 45 seconds. Jake tried to raise Danny on the direct channel but got only static. The jamming from all the energy weapons was making communication nearly impossible. He watched helplessly as the countdown ticked away. 30 seconds, 20, 10. The tactical display showed the orbital strike launching, 3 heavy plasma torpedoes, each carrying enough destructive power to level a city block. They streaked down through the atmosphere, targeting the exact spot where the swarm was massing for another assault. The explosion was visible even from orbit, a flash of white light that briefly outshone the sun. The shockwave rippled outward, flattening everything within half a kilometer. The tactical map updated, showing a massive crater where Sector 9 used to be. "Strike successful," the weapons officer reported. "Swarm forces eliminated. Casualty report coming in now." Jake's hands were shaking as he pulled up the list. 3 Krelthar warriors caught in the blast, 2 Drayan scouts, and 1 human medic. Danny Wright. Status killed in action. "No," Amy whispered beside him. "No, he couldn't have been. He wouldn't have stayed that close to—" "Lieutenant Carter, I need damage assessment on the eastern defensive line." Thexlar's voice cut through her denial. "Morrison, redirect medical supplies to staging Area 3. We're not done yet." Jake wanted to scream at the general, to demand why they had fired with their own people still in the zone. But he knew the answer. In the Coalition's eyes, losses were acceptable. That was how war worked. You made the hard choices and you kept moving forward. The fact that one of those losses was human, was Danny, was his friend. That didn't change the math. He forced himself to focus on his console, directing supply shuttles and updating casualty lists. Amy was crying silently beside him, but her hands never stopped moving across her datapad. They were professionals. They had a job to do. The battle raged on for another 4 hours. The swarm fought like they always did, with no regard for their own losses, throwing wave after wave at the Coalition lines. But slowly, with heavy casualties, the Allied forces began to push them back. The colonists were evacuated. The swarm nests were destroyed. As the last transport lifted off from Arcturus 7, carrying wounded warriors and traumatized civilians, Jake stared at the tactical display. The crater where Danny had died was still glowing with residual heat. Nothing could have survived that blast. The temperature alone would have melted metal. And Danny had just been human, fragile and soft. The command deck of the Celestial Dawn went absolutely silent. Every eye was fixed on the main view screen. watching the impossible figure stumble up the slope of the crater. The video feed was grainy from the heat distortion and smoke, but there was no mistaking what they were seeing. Danny Wright was alive. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the chest. His friend, the man they had just marked as killed in action, was walking out of a blast zone that should have vaporized him instantly. The plasma torpedoes had created temperatures hot enough to turn sand into glass. Nothing organic should have survived. "Get a medical team to that location immediately," Thexler ordered, his voice tight with something Jake had never heard from the general before. Shock, maybe, or disbelief. "Medical shuttle launching now," Amy said, her voice cracking with emotion. Her hands flew across her console. "Ground team, this is Celestial Dawn Command. We have visual on Courseman Wright. He's mobile but appears injured. 2 Krelthar casualties with him." The ground team's response was equally stunned. "Confirmed, Command. We see him. By the ancestors, he's actually walking. How is that possible?" Danny reached the edge of the crater and carefully lowered the 2 Krelthar warriors to the ground. Even from the orbital camera, Jake could see his friend was in bad shape. His uniform was mostly burned away, his exposed skin covered in ash and angry red burns. But he set down his patients with care, checking their vital signs before he finally collapsed forward onto his hands and knees. The medical shuttle touched down 30 seconds later, and a Vorath medic rushed out with a stretcher team. Jake watched them load Danny and the 2 Krelthar warriors, his mind still trying to process what he had just witnessed. The crater behind them glowed with residual heat. The ground turned to blackened glass that cracked and popped as it cooled. "Someone explained to me what I just saw," Thexlar said quietly. "Our sensors confirmed 3 direct impacts. The thermal bloom reached 4,000 degrees. That human should be ash." "Permission to leave my post and go to medical bay," Jake said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Granted. Take Carter with you. I want a full report on his condition." Jake and Amy were running before the general finished speaking. The corridors of the Celestial Dawn blurred past them as they sprinted toward the medical section. Other crew members pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass, and Jake caught snippets of conversation in various alien languages. Word was already spreading through the ship. The human survived the crater. The impossible human. They burst into medical bay just as the shuttle was docking. Dr. Venn, the chief medical officer and a Krelthar with decades of experience, was already scrubbing in for emergency surgery. The insectoid doctor's forearms moved with practiced efficiency, preparing instruments and scanning equipment. "Stay back," Dr. Venn ordered as the stretchers came through. "I don't know what condition he's in yet." The burns alone. Danny was conscious. That was the first thing Jake noticed. His friend's eyes were open, tracking the movement around him even though his face was covered in soot and blood. One of his arms hung at an odd angle, probably broken. His uniform had melted in places, fusing with his skin. "Jake," Danny croaked out when he saw them. "Amy, the Krelthar, check on them first. They took the worst of it. You took an orbital strike to the face and you're worried about them?" Amy said, laughing and crying at the same time. "You idiot. You beautiful, stupid idiot." Dr. Venn was running scanners over Danny's body, and Jake could see the confusion on the doctor's alien features. "This doesn't make sense. Severe dehydration, second-degree burns covering 40% of his body, 3 fractured ribs, minor radiation exposure, torn ligaments in both knees. He should be in shock. He should be unconscious. How far did he walk?" Jake asked quietly. One of the medics checked the location data from the center of the crater to the extraction point. "That's nearly 2 kilometers, carrying 2 adult Krelthar, each weighing approximately 95 kilograms. Impossible," Dr. Venn said flatly. "The pain alone would incapacitate any being. And the weight, his bone structure should have collapsed." "How did you do this, Courseman Wright?" Danny tried to shrug, then winced at the pain. "They needed help. Couldn't leave them there." "But the explosion," Dr. Venn persisted, already working on cleaning Danny's wounds. "You were at ground zero. How did you survive?" "Dove into a maintenance tunnel when I heard the incoming alert. Got about 20 meters in before the blast wave hit. Collapsed the tunnel entrance, but the walls held. Mostly." Danny coughed, and Jake saw blood on his lips. "Found Krixtal and Vorson already in there. Their armor saved them from the heat, but they couldn't move. Trapped under debris. Took me a while to dig them out." "A while," Amy repeated incredulously. "How long were you down there?" "Don't know. Maybe 3 hours. Lost my comm unit in the blast. Figured I should get them to the surface before I passed out. Dr. Venn was silent for a long moment, processing this information. You carried 2 injured warriors, each twice your mass, through 2 kilometers of unstable terrain, with multiple fractures and severe burns, after surviving a plasma strike that registered 4,000 degrees Celsius. Yes. Sir, why didn't you wait for rescue? Danny looked at the doctor like it was the strangest question he'd ever heard. Because they might not have made it that long. Borsan's suit had a crack in it. He was losing air. And I didn't know if anyone even knew we were alive. Jake felt a swell of pride in his chest. This was Danny, the same guy who had stayed up for 36 hours straight during basic training to help other recruits study. The same one who had run back into a burning building during their first posting to save a Dreyan child. He just didn't know how to give up on people. Over the next hour, Dr. Venn and his team worked on stabilizing all 3 patients. The 2 Krelthar warriors would recover fully, thanks mostly to Danny's quick thinking in getting them out of the tunnel before their air supplies ran out. Danny himself required extensive treatment for his burns and broken bones, but the prognosis was good. You'll be in a healing pod for at least 3 days, Dr. Venn told him, and light duty for 2 weeks after that. You're very lucky, Cortman. A few more minutes in that heat and the tissue damage would have been permanent. The Krelthar? Danny asked. We'll make full recoveries because of you. Krixtall is already awake and asking to see the human who carried him. Can I see him? Dr. Venn nodded and 2 medics wheeled Danny's bed into the adjacent recovery room. Krixtall was sitting up, his exoskeleton scarred and dented but intact. The Krelthar warrior was one of the most decorated soldiers on the ship, a veteran of dozens of combat operations. When he saw Danny, his mandibles clicked and what Jake had learned was respect. Cortman right, Krixtall said, his translated voice coming through the speakers. You saved my life and the life of my warrior. This debt will not be forgotten. No debt, Danny said. Just doing my job. Your job does not include walking through fire-carrying warriors 3 times your size. Your species is classified as non-combatant, fragile, too delicate for frontline duty. Well, Danny said with a weak smile, maybe the classification is wrong. Krixtall's mandibles clicked again, faster this time. It was the Krelthar version of laughter. Perhaps it is. I have fought beside many warriors, human. I have never seen one refuse to stay down the way you did. When we realized we were trapped, when the air began to thin, I prepared for death. Then you dug through solid rock with your bare hands to reach us. Jake looked at Danny's hands. They were wrapped in bandages now, but he could see the damage underneath. Torn fingernails, shredded skin, broken fingers. His friend had literally clawed through stone and metal to save those warriors. The general will want to see you, Krixtall continued, as will the Coalition Council. What you did today will not be ignored. I just want to sleep for about a week, Danny admitted. Dr. Venn ushered them out so Danny could rest, but not before Jake squeezed his friend's shoulder carefully. You scared us, man. We thought you were dead. I'm harder to kill than I look, Danny said, already drifting off as the pain medication kicked in. Outside the medical bay, Jake and Amy found General Thexelar waiting for them. The massive Vorith stood with his arms crossed, looking thoughtful in a way that seemed strange on his usually stern features. Report, he said simply. Jake summarized what they had learned, trying to keep his voice professional despite the emotion churning inside him. When he finished, Thexelar was quiet for a long moment. I have fought in 17 major campaigns, the general said finally. I have commanded warriors from 9 different species. I have seen acts of courage and sacrifice that would fill a library, but I have never seen anything quite like what that human did today. Sir? Amy asked. He's not stronger than us. He's not faster. His body doesn't heal like a Vorath or have the resilience of a Krelthar. By every metric we use to measure combat effectiveness, humans should not survive situations like this. Yet he did. And he didn't just survive. He saved 2 of my best warriors in the process. What are you saying, General? Thexelar looked at them both, his yellow eyes thoughtful. I'm saying that perhaps we've been measuring the wrong things. Strength and armor are valuable in a warrior, yes. But there's something else your species has that... The news about Danny Wright spread through the Galactic Coalition like wildfire. Within 24 hours, every ship in the fleet had heard about the human medic who survived an orbital strike and walked 2 kilometers carrying wounded warriors. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others wanted to see the evidence for themselves, but nobody could deny that something unusual had happened on Arcturus 7. Dr. Venn spent the next 3 days studying Danny's medical scans with an obsession that worried his staff. The Krelthar physician had been working in coalition medicine for 30 years, and he thought he understood most species biology. But humans kept surprising him. "Look at this," Dr. Venn said to his assistant, pulling up a holographic display of Danny's skeletal system. "His bone density is significantly lower than ours. His muscles lack the dense fiber structure of Voreth tissue. By all our standard measurements, he should be one of the weakest beings in the coalition. Yet he carried 2 Krelthar warriors," the assistant noted. "Exactly. So I went back through the medical literature on humans. We've been measuring them all wrong." Dr. Venn brought up new scans, these ones showing chemical compositions. When humans face extreme stress or danger, their bodies release a hormone called adrenaline. It's fascinating. This chemical temporarily overrides their pain receptors, increases their strength, sharpens their focus. It's like a natural combat drug. How much stronger does it make them? The reports are incredible. There are documented cases of humans lifting vehicles to save trapped children, humans fighting off large predators with their bare hands, humans performing complex surgery on themselves because no help was available. Dr. Venn's mandibles clicked with amazement. We classified them as fragile because we only looked at their baseline state. We never considered what they become when pushed to their limits. The assistant studied the data thoughtfully. What about the psychological aspect? He was in tremendous pain, severely injured with no guarantee of rescue. Most beings would have given up. That's the part I find most interesting. Dr. Venn pulled up another file, this one containing historical records from Earth. Human history is full of examples like this. They call it various things: determination, stubbornness, grit. Whatever the name, it's a psychological trait that seems nearly universal in their species. They simply don't accept defeat the way we do. Is that wise? Knowing when to surrender can save lives. Perhaps. But there's something compelling about a species that refuses to quit even when logic says they should. Dr. Venn looked toward the recovery room where Danny was sleeping in a healing pod. Corpsman Wright knew the odds were against him. He knew he was badly injured, but he also knew those warriors needed help, and that was enough to keep him moving. News of Dr. Venn's findings reached General Thexlar within hours. The Vorath commander called a senior staff meeting to discuss the implications. Jake and Amy were invited, along with Krikstal and other squadron leaders. Dr. Venn has shared his research with me, Thexlar began, displaying the medical data on the main screen. It appears we have fundamentally misunderstood human capabilities. They are not simply weak versions of other species. They are different in ways we failed to measure. With respect, General, a Vorath captain said, one exceptional individual doesn't change the classification. Corpsman Wright is clearly an outlier among his kind. Is he? Krikstal interrupted, his translated voice sharp. I have fought alongside humans for 8 months. I have watched them work through injuries that would hospitalize my warriors. I have seen them volunteer for dangerous tasks without hesitation. I dismissed this as foolishness before. Now I wonder if it's something else. They're reckless, the Vorath captain argued. They don't understand their own limitations. No, Amy said, speaking up for the first time. Everyone turned to look at her, and Jake could see her fighting to keep her voice steady. We understand our limitations perfectly. We just refuse to let them define us. Explain, Thexlar ordered. Amy stood, walking to the display. Every human grows up knowing we're physically weaker than most species in the galaxy. We know our bones break easier, our skin tears, we don't have claws or armor or venom. We've known this since we first met you. But here's what you need to understand. Humans didn't become the dominant species on our planet because we were the strongest. We did it because we were too stubborn to die. She pulled up images from Earth's history. Humans climbing mountains that should have killed them. Explorers crossing frozen wastelands. Soldiers holding defensive positions against impossible odds. This is what we do, Amy continued. We look at something that says you can't, and we do it anyway. We fail. We get hurt. We get back up and try again. Danny walking out of that crater wasn't exceptional for a human. It was just what we do when people need us. The room was silent. Jake could see various alien species processing this information, trying to reconcile it with their understanding of combat effectiveness. The swarm is pushing into 3 more systems, Thexlar said finally. We're deploying the fleet to counter them. If the humans are truly as capable as this evidence suggests, then keeping them out of combat is both wasteful and insulting. He looked directly at Jake and Amy. How many human personnel do we have aboard this ship capable of combat operations? 37, sir, Jake answered immediately, all with completed combat training, though most have been assigned to support roles. And if I authorize them for frontline deployment? Jake felt his heart rate spike. This was what they had been asking for since joining the coalition. They'd volunteer immediately, sir, even knowing the casualty rates. The swarm doesn't take prisoners. This won't be like training exercises, especially knowing that, sir. Amy's voice was firm. We didn't join the coalition to be safe. We joined to help. Thexler studied them for a long moment, then nodded. Very well. Put together a human combat unit. You'll deploy with Krixtal's squadron to the Viridian system. There's a colony there under heavy swarm assault. Consider this a field test. Yes, sir, Jake and Amy said in unison. As the meeting broke up, Krixtal approached them. The Krelthar warrior's expression was hard to read, but his body language suggested approval. I requested you specifically for my squadron. After what Danny did, I want to see what humans can do in actual combat. You won't be disappointed, Jake promised. I'm sure I won't, but I must warn you, some of the other species are not as convinced. They see right survival as luck, not skill. You'll need to prove them wrong. Over the next 48 hours, Jake and Amy assembled their team. The volunteers came immediately, just as predicted. Every human on the ship wanted in. They had to turn people down, limiting the team to those with the best combat scores and medical clearances. Danny was released from the healing pod on the second day, still covered in fresh pink skin where the burns had been. Dr. Venn cleared him for light duty only, which Danny immediately interpreted as cleared for combat operations. Absolutely not, Jake said when Danny showed up at the briefing. You just walked out of medical. You need rest. I need to be with my team, Danny countered. You're taking medics, right? I'm the best combat medic on this ship. You know it, I know it, and more importantly, the warriors who'll be bleeding out know it. He has a point, Amy admitted, and after what happened, having him along might actually boost morale. Humans and aliens both. Jake wanted to argue, but he knew they were right. Plus, he had learned long ago that trying to stop Danny from helping people was like trying to stop water from flowing downhill. It was just what he did. The human squad assembled in the hangar bay for equipment check. 30 humans in coalition combat armor, which had to be specially modified to fit their smaller frames. They looked tiny compared to the Krelthar warriors gearing up beside them, but Jake noticed something interesting. The Krelthar were watching the humans with something that looked like respect. Listen up, Jake addressed his team. We're about to be tested. High Command wants to see if humans can handle frontline combat. Some of them think we'll break under pressure, that we'll panic when things get bad. They don't know us very well, do they? Someone called out, and nervous laughter rippled through the group. No, they don't, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to go down there, we're going to complete our objectives, and we're going to show them exactly what humans are capable of. Not by being stronger than them or tougher than them, but by being us. By refusing to quit no matter what happens. Hua! The group responded using the old Earth military call. Krixtal approached, his armor gleaming. That was a good speech. Very human. But words are easy, Morrison. The swarm won't care about your determination. They'll try to rip you apart, and they're very good at it. Then I guess we'll have to be better at not being ripped apart, Jake replied. The Krelthar's mandibles clicked with what might have been amusement. I'm beginning to understand why Dr. Venn finds your species so fascinating. You face impossible odds with jokes. It's either very brave or very stupid. Often both, Amy said cheerfully. The transport ships began loading up. Jake took one last look at his team. 37 humans about to prove that fragile didn't mean breakable. Danny caught his eye and nodded. Whatever happened down there, The transport shook violently as it descended through Viridian's atmosphere. Through the window, Jake could see dozens of other coalition ships making the same descent, carrying warriors from half a dozen species. Below them, the colony was burning. Even from this altitude, he could see the swarm, a dark mass spreading across the landscape like a living shadow. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot announced. Hot zone. Expect immediate contact. Jake checked his rifle one more time. It was a standard coalition plasma weapon, scaled down for human hands. Next to him, Amy was doing the same. her face set in concentration. Behind them, the rest of the human squad was quiet, focused. They had trained for this, but training was very different from reality. The transport hit the ground hard and the rear door dropped open. Jake's first breath of Viridian air was hot and tasted like smoke. His second breath was cut short as plasma fire streaked past his head. "Move, move, move," Crixtel shouted, his forearms already firing at targets Jake couldn't even see yet. The human squad poured out of the transport and into chaos. The landing zone was supposed to be secure, but the swarm had already broken through the perimeter in 3 places. Jake saw them clearly for the first time. Creatures that looked like someone had taken every nightmare insect from Earth and made them bigger, meaner, and covered in biological armor. They moved in perfect synchronization, driven by the hive mind, fearless and relentless. "Take cover behind the transport," Jake ordered, dropping behind a landing strut as acid spit from a swarm soldier splashed where he'd been standing a second before. The acid hissed and ate through the metal like it was paper. The coalition line was already falling back. A group of Vorath heavy infantry was being overrun on the left flank, their armor no match for the sheer numbers of swarm drones. On the right, Draen scouts were retreating in good order, but they were running out of room to retreat into. "We're supposed to hold this landing zone for reinforcements," Amy shouted over the noise of weapons fire. "If we lose it, the whole operation fails." "Then we don't lose it," Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. He keyed his comm to the human squad frequency. "All units, this is Morrison. They're trying to flank us on both sides. Split into 3 groups. Danny, take 10 and shore up the left with the Vorath. Amy, take 10 to the right. I'll hold center with the rest. Remember your training and watch each other's backs." The squad split up without hesitation. Jake watched Danny sprint toward the Vorath position, already calling out medical instructions to his team. The kid who had walked out of a crater now ran straight toward danger like it was the most natural thing in the world. A swarm warrior, bigger than the drones, burst through the smoke directly in front of Jake. It was massive. Easily 3 meters tall, with blade-like appendages that could cut through armor. Jake fired, his plasma bolts scorching its carapace but not stopping it. The creature kept coming. Then he remembered his training. Not coalition training, human training. The instructor's voice in his head. "You're not trying to be stronger. Use your advantages. You're smaller, faster, more adaptable." Jake dove forward, sliding under the creature's slash, and came up inside its guard. At close range, he fired directly into the softer joints where its armor plates met. The swarm warrior shrieked, a sound that bypassed his ears and went straight into his brain, and collapsed. "Good kill," someone shouted. It was Kevin Hayes, one of the squad sharpshooters. "But there's about 1,000 more behind it." He wasn't exaggerating. The swarm was pouring through the broken perimeter like a flood. Jake saw a Krelthur warrior go down, overwhelmed by drones. Saw a Vorath soldier's armor breached, acid eating through to the flesh beneath. "Fall back to secondary line," a coalition officer was ordering. "We can't hold this position." "Negative," Jake countermanded. "Human squad, hold position. If they break through here, they'll overrun the medical station and the civilians we're trying to evacuate." "Morrison, your squad doesn't have the firepower to..." "Then we'll find another way." Jake switched to the human frequency. "Listen up. We can't match them for strength, so we're going to be smarter. Use the terrain. Set traps. Make them come to us on our terms. Kevin, can you hit that fuel depot from here? The one that's about to explode from all the weapons fire anyway." "Yeah, I can hit it. Wait until the swarm pushes past it, then light it up. Sam, Linda, I need you to rig demo charges on those support columns. When I give the signal, drop the whole structure on them. Everyone else controlled fire. Make every shot count. We don't have the ammunition to waste." The swarm kept coming. But now the humans were ready. Kevin's shot ignited the fuel depot just as a wave of drones passed it, and the explosion threw dozens of them back. Sam and Linda's demolition work brought down a half-collapsed building, creating a bottleneck that forced the swarm to funnel through a narrow gap where the humans could concentrate their fire. "They're adapting," Amy's voice came through the comm. "The hive mind is learning our tactics. Then we adapt faster," Jake replied, already looking for the next advantage. "Danny, status on the left flank?" "Holding, but it's close. The Vorath are exhausted. Their armor is too heavy for extended combat. They're overheating." Jake processed that. The Vorath were incredibly strong, but their powered armor required massive energy. In sustained combat, that was a weakness. But humans didn't have powered armor. They had endurance. Can the Vorath hold for another hour? Maybe, if they don't have to move much. Then set up a defensive position and let them become a strong point. Have your team run support. Bring them water, manage their ammunition, give them breathing room. We can move faster than they can. On it, the battle settled into a brutal rhythm. The swarm would attack, the coalition would barely hold. The swarm would regroup and attack again. An hour passed, then 2, then 4. Jake lost track of time. Lost track of how many swarm warriors he'd killed. Lost track of everything except the next target, the next order, the next moment of survival. His muscles were screaming. His armor had taken half a dozen hits and was barely functional. But he kept moving, kept fighting, because stopping meant dying and dying meant failing the people depending on him. Around him, the human squad was doing the same. They weren't as strong as the Krelthar or as armored as the Vorath. But when a Krelthar warrior fell, it was a human who dragged him to cover. When ammunition ran low, it was humans who redistributed supplies under fire. When a gap opened in the line, it was humans who filled it without being ordered to. Morrison, this is Krikstal. The Krelthar commander's voice was strained. My warriors are exhausted. We need to rotate out. Can you hold for 30 more minutes? We're about to get reinforcements. We're running on reserves. My soldiers are... Wait, how long have we been fighting? Jake checked his chrono. 6 hours and 14 minutes. There was a long silence. That's impossible. No species can maintain combat effectiveness for that long without rest. We should all be collapsed from exhaustion. Welcome to fighting alongside humans, Jake said, firing another burst at an advancing drone. We don't know when to quit. On the left flank, Danny was performing battlefield surgery on a Vorath warrior who had taken a hit to the leg. The acid was eating through the armor, and if it reached the femoral artery, the soldier would bleed out in seconds. Danny's hands were steady despite the plasma fire streaking overhead, despite his own exhaustion, despite the swarm drone that was charging directly at his position. Little busy here, Danny shouted. Kevin Hayes shot the drone mid-stride and it collapsed 3 meters from Danny's position. The medic didn't even look up, just kept working. Artery clamped, Danny announced. You're going to make it, big guy. Just need to get you stabilized and... An explosion rocked the area. A swarm artillery creature had gotten into range, and its first shot had been terrifyingly accurate. The blast threw Danny sideways, and for a horrible moment Jake thought his friend was dead. Then Danny pulled himself up, checked the Vorath warrior, who was somehow still alive, and continued working. His left arm was clearly broken, hanging at an angle that made Jake wince just looking at it. But Danny just braced it against his body and kept using his right hand. Somebody want to deal with that artillery? Danny called out, his voice tight with pain but not panicked. I've got it, Amy responded. Jake watched her lead a team of 5 humans in a flanking maneuver that should have been suicide. They used the destroyed vehicles and rubble as cover, moving fast and low until they were close enough to hit the artillery creature's weak spots. It went down in a spray of biofluid, and Amy's team was already moving back before the swarm could respond. How are they doing this? Jake heard a Vorath officer asking over the command channel. They should be broken by now. Their casualties, their exhaustion, why aren't they breaking? Because they're human, Krixler responded, and there was something like awe in his voice. They don't break. They just keep fighting. The reinforcements finally arrived at hour 7. Fresh coalition troops poured into the battle and the tide finally turned. The swarm began to retreat, their assault broken against the stubborn defense. The landing zone was held. The Coalition High Council chamber was built to intimidate. It was a massive circular room with seats arranged in ascending tiers, designed so that anyone standing at the center felt very small. Representatives from 43 species sat in those seats, all of them looking down at the presentation being given by General Thexlar. Jake stood at attention beside the general, trying not to think about the fact that he was addressing the most powerful governing body in known space. Amy stood on his other side and behind them. Danny Wright stood in his dress uniform, his left arm still in a support brace. The evidence speaks for itself, Thexlar was saying, pulling up tactical data from the Viridian battle. Human forces held a critical position for 7 hours against overwhelming swarm numbers. Casualty rates were significantly lower than projected. Combat effectiveness remained consistent throughout the engagement, despite conditions that would normally cause other species to collapse from exhaustion. Interesting, but hardly conclusive, Councilmember Dravok said. The Vorath representative was ancient, his scales faded to gray with age. One successful engagement does not warrant a species-wide reclassification. Perhaps these particular humans were exceptional. That's what I thought initially, Thexelar admitted. So I requested data from other ships in the fleet, ships with human crew members assigned to support roles. He pulled up more reports, dozens of them. These are incident reports from the past 6 months. In every case where humans were present during combat situations, they performed beyond expectations. The displays showed various scenarios: humans conducting repairs under fire, humans evacuating wounded while being actively targeted, humans holding defensive positions that should have been overrun. Again and again the pattern repeated. Humans placed in dangerous situations, humans refusing to back down. They have a saying on Earth, Thexelar continued. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. It took me months to understand what that actually means. It's not about physical toughness. It's about mental and emotional resilience that doesn't quit. Council member Sarivan, a Drayan with silver fur and 6 graceful limbs, leaned forward with interest. General, you're advocating for reclassification from Class C non-combatant to what level? Class A frontline combatant, Thexelar said firmly. The chamber erupted in conversation. Multiple species began talking at once, translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping voices. Preposterous, Dravok said loudly. Class A is reserved for species with proven combat superiority. The humans are physically inferior by every standard metric. Their bone density alone is irrelevant, Thexelar interrupted, which caused even more conversation. Interrupting a council member was considered extremely rude. With respect, council member, we've been measuring the wrong things. We measured strength and armor and regeneration rates. We never measured determination. We never measured adaptability under stress. We never measured the will to continue fighting when every rational calculation says you should surrender. Those qualities are admirable, Sarivan said, her translated voice gentle but firm, but they don't change biology. Humans are fragile. They will die in situations where other species would survive. Actually, Dr. Venn spoke up from his position in the gallery, my research suggests humans have several biological advantages we initially overlooked. Their adrenaline response allows them to temporarily exceed their normal capabilities. Their pain tolerance is exceptional. Their healing rate, while not as fast as some species, is remarkably consistent, and their ability to function on minimal rest is unprecedented. The Krelthar do not tire easily, Dravok argued. The Vorath can fight for days with our powered armor. What makes humans special? Crixtal stood from his seat in the gallery. As a decorated warrior, he had the right to speak before the council. Council members, I fought beside the humans at Viridian. I've also reviewed combat footage from Arcturus 7, where Corman Wright survived an orbital strike. I've come to understand something important. The Krelthar are strong, yes. The Vorath are powerful. But we all have limits, and when we reach those limits, we stop. Humans don't. They reach their limits and keep going. That's the difference. That's recklessness, Dravok said dismissively. They'll get themselves killed. Maybe, Crixtal agreed. But they'll complete the mission first, and they'll save whoever they can on the way. Council member, I've lost count of how many times a human pulled one of my warriors to safety during the Viridian battle. They were exhausted, injured, outgunned, but they never stopped trying to help. Danny shifted slightly beside Jake, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Jake knew his friend hated being held up as an example. Danny just did what he thought was right and never understood why others found it remarkable. I'd like to call Lieutenant Morrison to speak, Thexelar said. Jake's heart rate spiked, but he stepped forward to the center of the chamber. 43 species worth of council members looked down at him, and he felt very, very small. Lieutenant Morrison, Sarivan said kindly, you led the human squad at Viridian. Tell us in your own words why you think humans should be classified as frontline combatants. Jake took a breath, organizing his thoughts. Council members, I'm not going to pretend humans are physically superior. We're not. Put us in a straight fight against a Krelthar warrior or a Vorath soldier and we'll lose. But war isn't just about individual strength. It's about teamwork, adaptability, and refusing to give up when things get hard. Elaborate, Sarivan prompted. Humans evolved on a difficult planet. We weren't the strongest predator or the fastest prey. We survived by being persistent, by working together, by trying new approaches when old ones failed. Those traits are built into who we are. Jake gestured to the tactical displays. At Viridian, we didn't win by being stronger than the swarm. We won by adapting faster, by supporting each other, and by refusing to abandon the position even when retreat would have been logical. What about casualties? HFY challenged. Humans will die at higher rates than more durable species. How is that acceptable? It's not, Jake said bluntly. We don't want to die. But we're willing to take risks if it means saving others or completing the mission. That's not recklessness, that's a choice. We understand the danger. We just think some things are worth the danger. Like what? Sirivan asked, genuinely curious. Jake thought about Danny walking out of that crater carrying wounded warriors. About Amy leading her team against the artillery creature. About every human in his squad who had fought for 7 hours straight because people were depending on them. Like each other. Jake said simply, like the soldiers fighting beside us. Like the civilians who need protection. We're not fighting because we're fearless. We're fighting because we're terrified of what happens if we don't. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then Sarivan spoke again. You make a compelling argument, Lieutenant. But I still worry about sending humans into combat situations where their physical limitations will get them killed. Then don't send us alone, Jake replied. Send us with Krelthar warriors who can provide strength. With Vorath soldiers who can provide armor. With Drayan scouts who can provide intelligence. Let us do what we're good at, adapting, enduring, and refusing to quit. We're not asking to replace other species. We're asking to fight alongside them. As equals, Amy added, stepping forward to join Jake. Not as support staff or medical teams or logistics coordinators. As warriors who happen to be small and fragile but who show up anyway. Council member Dravok looked like he wanted to argue more. But Krixtal stood again. Council, I request permission to share combat footage from Viridian. Specifically, the moment when Corman Wright treated a wounded Vorath warrior while under direct fire. The screens around the chamber lit up with the footage. Jake had seen it before. The helmet cam from one of the Krelthar warriors showed Danny kneeling beside the fallen Vorath, his hands steady as he worked, despite the plasma fire streaking past. The swarm drone charging at him. The last-second shot that saved him. And through it all, Danny never stopped working, never abandoned his patient even when running would have been the smart choice. This human had a broken arm, Krixtal narrated. He had been fighting for 6 hours. He could have retreated to safety. Instead, he saved a warrior from a species that had dismissed his kind as too delicate for combat. The footage ended, and the chamber was silent again. This time even Dravok seemed to have no immediate argument. I propose we vote, Sarivan said finally. The question before the council is whether humans should be reclassified from Class C non-combatant to Class A frontline combatant. All in favor? Jake held his breath as the voting indicators lit up around the chamber. One by one, council members registered their votes. Some voted no. The Vorath contingent was split and several other species remained skeptical. But more voted yes. The Krelthar voted unanimously in favor. The Drayan voted yes. Even some Vorath, swayed by the evidence, voted to reclassify. When the final tally appeared, it showed a clear majority in favor. The motion passes, Sarivan announced. Effective immediately, humans are reclassified as Class A combat personnel within the Galactic Coalition. Jake felt Amy grab his hand and squeeze. Behind them, Danny let out a,